In this video, we're going to talk about part 2 of our how to create multi-page invoices video. So this is part 2, and part 1 we talked about one strategy for managing a multi-page invoice or a multi-page estimate or any sort of document where you have a record, then you have a number of line items that might cause the document to stretch to multiple pages. And there's really 2 established FileMaker techniques. Now, the technique that's in FM Starting Point with the desktop layouts and the technique that we showed in part 1 is really the simplest one, I think, to wrap your head around. The idea that you have these line items right here, that these line items, there's a fixed number here. So what you would do is you would duplicate this layout and you would create a page 2, or you could actually go to layout mode and create it. You could stretch this section right here. You can grab it. There we go. Grab it and build the whole thing again down below and create a page 2. Just turned on the page breaks here so now we can see that. So you would build the second part down here. Now, this is the simplest to wrap your head around because this mechanically looks like an invoice. It feels like an invoice or a order or an estimate, etc. I catch some grief sometimes from people who say, well, this isn't the most correct way to do it because it's not as flexible as possible. I mean, you could have a 2-page or a 4-page or a 20-page invoice, and you need a technique that works all the time, 100% of the time. That's true, and we can do that, and that's what this video is about, but mentally, a little bit more gymnastics in understanding what's going on. So, we are in the master copy of FM Starting Point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layout. And so I've duplicated the layout. It's got, you see right here, it says copy on it. And I'm going to go to layout setup. And I'm going to change this to print detail, multi-page capability. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put the numbers like this for now, XX on here, because I don't know what they're going to be. And then what I'm going to do is, just so we don't lose track of this, I'm going to say Manage Layouts. I'm going to bring this window up a little bit so we can see what's going on. I'm going to go down here to this one, and I'm going to drag it up in here and to Invoices. I'm going to drop it. We hadn't gone back to Browse mode over here. And save the name. So it's XX over here, but over here, because we haven't gone to browse mode and saved the changes, got to remember to save the changes, it doesn't reflect in the system. So this is it right here. So this is 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. We can put it right there. And there you can see it doesn't have the name change yet, but we just reorganized that way. So then we actually know it's going to be 99. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to go to the edit here. I'm going to say 99. And then go back to browse mode, and it's saved in the system. So now we have this new invoice. Now this is the invoice that we're going to build this new technique on. Now it's really important to understand this technique fundamentally from a structural level. So on the left I have layout 95, and over here on the right is layout 99. This is going to be the altered one. Now it's important to understand that over here, this layout belongs to the invoice table or a invoice table occurrence, actually the anchor table occurrence. And that's important because once you get some comfort with that, then doing what we're about to do is not so bad. Once again, that's why this technique is a part 2 technique. It's a little bit mentally deeper, but it's way more flexible in the big scheme of things. So this is the invoice. These are invoice line items. Over here, it's totally going to be different. What we're going to do is we're going to say this entire layout belongs to invoice line items. So we're going to go here to invoice setup. We're going to say it belongs to not the anchor T12, but to the anchor T13 invoice line items. And you're like, whoa, really? Yeah, really. And so what happens is that this section right here at the top is going to be the header section. And then this section right here where this one line would be is going to be the body part that's repeated. So effectively, this second technique is one where we have a body part And because we're in line items, it's the body part for each of the line items. And it repeats as many times as we need to. And so if it's 100 items or 200 items or 5 items, it doesn't matter. It's going to repeat that body part for the found set. And so basically, we use kind of this FileMaker's report generation capability to create a multi-page invoice. You say, well, what about the portal? Hey, there is no portal. The portal's going away. So I'm in layout mode. What I need to do is organize the body part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to layout part setup, and it's right here. And I'm going to say create a title header. And I'm going to say, okay. So I'm going to hit done. Now I'm going to grab it, and I'm holding the Option key on my keyboard down. If you're on a Windows machine, you're going to need to hold down one of the modifier keys. And I'm dragging it down here just to move things down. And so I'm going to drag it to about, well, it should be right there. But I have the space at the top, right? So then I'm going to grab the portal here. See, it's got the fields in it. Let me just drag out the fields here so we can keep the fields. I'm moving them off the side of the screen, so don't get too excited. I'm going to get rid of the portal. The portal's gone, okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and zoom here a little bit so we can see this. I guess that will make life a lot easier for everyone. And so I'm going to grab all this material right here. I'm holding down the Command key now on the Mac so I get just the items inside. I'm going to slide them up to where they basically touch, okay? And so these items are in the header, and this section of stuff right here needs to be, I'm going to move it up like that, okay? So there we go. And then I can slide this up a little bit like that. Okay, so then this stuff is in the header. The body part here needs to be fairly small and repeatable with just these items in here. However, we have a header, we have a body, we still need another part. So I'm going to say layout, part setup. I'm going to say create. I'm going to go title footer. So let me slide this up here like that. We've got this rounded box thing here. And I'm going to have this come back up and fit inside the header here. There we go. And then I'm going to drag this up so it all collapses. And so this is our invoice. So if I zoom back out, so hopefully this mentally makes more sense now. So this is the header, this is the footer, and then the body part here in the middle is what's going to repeat, if that makes sense, right? So it doesn't matter how many items that we have, it will just keep repeating. And so that's basically technique 2. And I'm actually going through the process of building it here for you. Now, as a quick note, the header section here is displaying through the relationship. So a lot of you wonder, well, how does this information come here? The information in the header is going to display information from the invoice record itself. So the body part is going to repeat for every record we have. The header will display once data from the actual invoice itself. The line items are going to be repeated in the body. And then once those are done, the footer will be displayed. Once again, that is data that is attached to the actual invoice. So I'm not going to probably talk about the header and footer too much other than to say that this layout belongs to T13 invoice line items anchor, and the header and the footer data are going to come from one of the related TOs to T13 that connects the invoice line items to the invoice itself. So the header and the footer will bring you data through T13B, and we'll cover that more in just a minute. So you can see this process. Now, the rub is, of course, here I need to go back to layout mode. I go back to layout mode, and I'm going to fix these items here. So I can say specify field, and I'm going to go to T13 at the top, and it goes to ID product. So it actually kind of auto locks on, but you have to go back to the correct table occurrence, which is this T13. And once again, there's product and quantity. Yep, it does those automatically, which is nice. And then unit price, and finally the extended price. So basically all the fields on this layout are going to have to get some level of treatment, right, to be reassigned to the correct area. If I go to browse mode, you can see that we are looking at one item here, but we have to be in this list view mode right here. So if you can see right here, that's form view, which means one record on screen at a time, which breaks the idea. We want to be in a list view, and you're like, really, a list view? Yeah, really a list view. So then check this out. So then we actually have a multi-page, actually we have a pretty big invoice. Now, if I go to preview mode, now notice the body part is being repeated for each of the records in the current found set. Now, we haven't controlled the found set yet. That's part of a script that we're going to have to work on here in just a little bit. But you see that this starts to look like an invoice. Not only that, it's going to be a functional multi-page invoice. Now, a real important point here I'm just going to touch on now, and then I'm going to kind of leave it. And that is that this information here at the top, and you'll see me talk about this in a little bit, this information at the top belongs to related data through the T13. That's the table occurrence group we're on. But T13B is the related table occurrence that brings us the invoice data. So all these fields here have to be redirected to T13B. Not only that, you say, well, which relationship drives the data from the header? Because remember, each record here can have its own relationship to the invoice. Well, the header gets its data from the topmost record. So luckily, these all have the same relationship to the invoice, so they all make sense. But just understand that the top record here drives the T13B relationship that the header will use. So any relationships that the header need, it gets the data from the topmost record. Any relationships that the footer need, it gets from the bottommost record. And so it basically borrows that data so it can complete the relationship. In other videos, we talk about how the body is really this thing that we can think about. It makes sense because every repetition of the body is real data in the system. Well, what is the header? The header does not really represent real data in the system because there's no data for it. So how does a header get related data when it has no information on this side? I mean, there's no data really on this side of the relationship to bring things through. Well, FileMaker knows that. It's kind of an abstraction. It's once again why this video is kind of somewhat more complicated. The header is going to borrow the data that it needs from the topmost record in the found set, and then the footer will borrow the data from the bottommost record in the found set. So just keep that in mind. So moving on here, let's talk about where this footer actually shows up. And we have this footer down here that's on the first page. Now, the question is where do you want this section actually occurring with all the totals in here? And really, we should not have set it for being the title footer because that's on the title page. It really needed to be effectively the trailing grand summary. Okay, does that make sense? I go back to preview mode. We have the header here. We have bodies. Notice how it breaks nicely right there. We go to page 2. And then it goes down here. Now, I think it's not putting the bottom on here because it doesn't fit on the page. If you go to page 3, then you get the final trailing footer section, right? Does that mean the grand trailing summary? So that's basically the conceptual idea here of what we've done. So if I go to the relational diagram right here, and I'm going to make this fit in the window because normally it fits for me in a big giant 27-inch display. I can go like this, right? And so this is how we see everything on screen. So each of these is a table occurrence group, right? And they're togs, and we're using anchor buoy. So what we did, to be clear about this, as I'm going to zoom in over here, the original system is based upon that the invoice itself is attached to this, and then you have the multiple line items here. And that was the T12 system. That's what we had previously, okay? What we've done is we have rewired the print screen. So when it prints, it goes to a layout which is based upon T13. So we're on T13, and relationally, it connects back to the invoices right here. So we're going to use the relational connection right here, T13B, quite a bit because this is how the line items can talk to the invoice itself. So here's the invoice. So it's exactly backwards. So 13 to 13B is exactly backwards of T12 to T12J. And the fact that one's B and one's J doesn't matter. It's just the order that they were created as we're developing it. But we use this and this to drive most of the critical invoicing that you've seen. But it's not the most flexible when it comes to multi-page invoices. So you can either use the technique in the first video or come back into this video and set up and use this technique. Now keep in mind, we're actually building this into the master copy of FM Starting Point. So starting with FM Starting Point 4.7 and later, we're going to build it so that if you attempt to print a multi-page invoice, it will detect it and jump to this new technique. So we've built it in here. So if you print, I think the cutoff is like 17 or 18, whatever it is, line items, it jumps to a second page. So what we're going to do is that we're going to say if we have more than that many line items, then we're going to actually print off of a different layout. We're going to print off of L99 as opposed to printing off the original one-page invoice. So we built this into FM Starting Point. You're going to continue to see the demo here evolve, but I want to let you know that if you go to Starting Point and you open it up, you're going to see this actually in there for invoices for sure. When we're on this screen here and we say print, it has to transfer us from here to here, which means we have to jump layouts. Not only that, we have to effectively run a script that says show the related records. So we have these items here, and it's T12J. We say show the related records here, right? And so we can write a script that will actually do this. We actually probably already have a print script, I would guess. Print. So what does print do? Print, if I double click it, run script 1156. So as we bring up 1156, it's print invoice form, and there's no parameters. So what we're going to do, once again here to work through this, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up script workspace. I'm using keyboard shortcuts. At this point in the video, you should know about keyboard shortcuts. Command B for browse, Command L for layout, Command Shift S for scripts, Command Shift D for database schema. You can also go manage right here, say manage scripts, right? So here is the scripts. So we're going to go down to 11. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and close that. 1150. Okay, it's in reporting there. I guess printing an invoice would be kind of considered a report. That's, I guess, what we were thinking. 1156. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this and I'm going to say duplicate. And it's going to make me a new script. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1157. And then I'm going to resequence these real quick here so we keep from having duplicates. Normally, I resequence before we ship the product, but we are on video here and I'm trying to set a good example, and having two scripts of the same number is kind of awkwardly sloppy. So what I've got is print form. I'm going to call it multi-page. And then so what we do is we just take script 1157 and we hack it. Now, so I'm going to narrow it down here so we get a little bit more zip in here, and I'm going to take a look. It's not too big. So it decides whether we're going to print the basic or the modern, and there's no really basic or modern on this one, so I'm just going to nuke this if statement here. The part of the script of 1156 that we cared about is just this right here. So we do a page setup. It does a page setup on script 17. Here's the rub. We have to make sure that when we get to this layout right here, that we have the correct found set of records. Now, knowing what we know about FileMaker, found sets and sort orders are specific to a particular layout on a particular window. By just jumping to that layout, we're not going to keep the correct found set of records because we're jumping table occurrence group. So what we need to do is we need to do a go to related record. So I type GTRR. When I go to relationships here, we're telling the system that we are right here on invoices and we're pressing the GTRR button and we want to go to the related records through the relationship through J, right? And that is ID invoice to ID invoice. Okay, makes sense. And then as it displays, we're going to just tell it to display data from this TO here. So it's going to do show the related records from J. And while you're at it, jump layouts over here and start us right here, right? And then jump layouts. So it's kind of step 1 is show me the related records. Step 2 is jump to this table occurrence here with the layout that we just created. So the layout we created, which is hiding over here, right? So show us the related records from here. Jump to table occurrence T13, and while we're at it, jump to this layout right here. So that's what this one command is going to do. Now, we need to do error checking on this script to make sure it works correctly. I am not going to set that up in this video. That's going to be your error correcting video. But get related records from T12J, okay? Use the layout. I'm going to say jump layouts. Now, it's going to show me the layouts that are available based upon T12J. Notice that invoices turned down here and none of the other layouts are available, just this one because it's tied to T13. T12J and T13 are both tied to the same base table. The base table is invoice line items, right? So this is kind of, like I said, people said, why didn't you make part 2 of this video? It's because it basically taps into numerous skill sets you have as a developer. Now I'm going through it, and because we're going through it nice and slow and not overly fast, hopefully you're following along. But people want to know why we didn't do it. It's because you have to know anchor buoy, you have to know relationships, you have to know go to related record, you have to know a bunch of stuff. So we're going to go to that layout there. We could pop it in a new window, but I don't think we will. Let's keep that simple. And we're going to say show only the related records for the current invoice. This should say match the current invoice that we're on. So I don't want to see related records from the current found set. This is confusing. Just set it this way. If you want to play with it on your own, that's fine. I'm going to hit OK. This thing is basically done. This should work. Now, the problem is that the script theoretically is done. We need a way of activating it. So I'm going to say script 1157 here is going to make it visible. So you can activate it manually up under the scripts menu. That's one thing that we're going to do. I'm going to go and save it. So, because it has a star there, I tell save, now it's saved, which is cool. I'm going to go to these over here. I'm going to close that, close that, close that, close that. So we just have this one script. Now, we can activate the script. The script will go here. It looks like it'll probably print and then we'll come back. The rub is that the header hasn't been rewired up. Now, what we have to do here is go through all these relationships in here and rewire them to, I'm going to say exit preview and go to layout mode. And then all these like ID invoice, this has to be rewired from T12, right? Which remember, everything below this line is unrelated tables. It's not connected. So we only can connect in our current situation to these right here. That's why we use anchor buoy. It narrows our selection of things down. It keeps things as simple as possible. So we go to T13B and it locks onto it right automatically. So it's one of these things that is trying to autocorrect itself. So we go back, but we have to go up here and we have to keep selecting T13B, and we just have to do this until we're numb in the face, right? Over and over again. So what I can do is I can fast forward this a little bit at high speed. So now down at the bottom here, we are going to connect these as well, at least a couple of them here, to T13B as well. Once again, the context of this layout is driven from the T13 table occurrence group. And as we mentioned before, there is no record data that really drives the header or the footer. So the header derives its relationship or its data from the top record, and the footer derives the data it needs through a relationship in the bottom record. So I'm going to go to browse mode, and just for giggles and see what we get, and go to preview mode. And you can already see that some of the data is becoming alive, right? See the live data coming up here, invoice 1 with dates and stuff. But as we go through this, we see that we do start to have functional stuff. But this is the technique on how to build it. It really is. We can try the script just for fun to see what we get. Browse mode. Now, there are only 2 line items here, right? So when we run this script here, we should only get 2 line items. So I'm going to also activate the script debugger, so we have like way too many windows open for a little tiny video. But I'm going to go ahead and hit play on this script to run the script, okay? And I'm going to bring this back up here so we can see it shows where we're at. So you're also getting to see the script debugger in action. I'm going to say freeze window, but freeze window won't do anything because we're in script debugger. Commit the records, make sure they're saved. Then go to related records and switch layouts. Pow. And there it is. It actually did work. Now, you don't see it working really great yet because you don't see the header. But if I hit stop right now, and I get rid of the debugger here, and I go to preview, there's your invoice, and it totally works. So that's money in the bank. So this is how you make a multi-page invoice. You might want to have a small header and a small footer on the layout. So once again, we have you have this header here, the title header, and the grand trailing footer, basically, which is what this is. And we have the body that repeats in the middle. But you might want a small header on page 2 and page 3 and page 4, and a small footer on the pages that are not the last page, right? Makes sense. So you know that you could put page number information there and stuff like that. So if you don't put something on the middle pages, all you're going to have is the body repeating itself, down the layout. And of course, if you have a 5-page invoice, then people are going to get confused between page 2, 3, and 4 and which one's in the correct order, etc. So think about little headers and footers on the in-between pages. That's your video. It's a long video, but that's how more advanced FileMaker developers create and build multi-page documents, not just invoices, but estimates, POs, work orders, things like that. The trick is to take the line items that are variable in the quantity of the line items and make that the body part, a repeating body part. And then that plays the FileMaker strengths for creating a nice printable document. And of course, these days it's a PDF, but where you're printing on paper, whatever you're doing on the PDF, it makes it nice and pretty. Now, once again, as you've seen, we've covered relational design with anchor buoy and knowing what anchor and what buoy you're using. We've covered the go to related record script step. We've covered creating body parts and jumping through the relational graph and changing context. So this video is definitely probably I would say it's intermediate developer. You got to have your head wrapped around the idea of context, where you're at. So I'm Richard Carlton. That's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. Look for this to be kind of buried in here and hidden, waiting for you if you want to use it.